While music making often seems like magic, it is far from that. In fact, it is rare for inspiration to hit out of nowhere and make us write a great song in a few minutes. More often, it is a highly complex process, not an easy one, but certainly one which is very possible to master.
In this series, we want to provide approaches to producing music which we have not seen be talked about much. Our aim is to break down production in a theoretical and logical way and show how to then convert theory into practice.
K-pop consists of many genres, so in this mini-series we're focusing on one rather popular at the moment sound, and we're going to explain how we made this track right here.
This track will also be part of our Discord challenges, so if you don't want to miss out, make sure to join our free community with the link below.
Despite focusing on a particular sound here, a lot of the approaches we're about to discuss are applicable all across the board.
So, what is the first step?
This may seem trivial, but it is anything but that. One of the most common mistakes beginner producers make is starting a track without a clear goal, a clear vision in mind. Of course, once you get more experience, this can also lead to amazing results. But when first starting out, we highly recommend staying away from it, as it could be incredibly hard to reach high-quality results.
And yes, we know this step may seem unnecessary or boring, but trust us, it will help you be consistent and also make sure that you will have significantly less frustrations later. After all, starting a track is exponentially easier than finishing a full track. Believe us, we are speaking from experience.
So what is the preparation we're talking about? We have spoken about the importance of references before, and this is exactly why. References provide that goal, that vision, and help us stay on track. Our references One Eye and Something, Twice as Bloom, and ARTMS Sparkle. And, as members of our community will notice, these were also the references for our first production challenge.
When picking references, a few things are important to keep in mind. First, pick references of the same or very similar genre. Second, pick references that don't sound too similar. And third, pick references which you like. Yes, really.
Now with our references in mind, we can approach our production by simply analyzing these tracks. There are many aspects you can focus on here, but this is how we like to start.
We can see that Bloom has a BPM of 130, Sparkle 124, and Something 140. This can already tell us that for our track we may want to consider a song between 124 BPM and 140 BPM. And as you can see, we opted for the higher end of that with 140 BPM.
Next we tend to look at the song's key. What we recommend not to do here is pick the same key as one of the references. This can quickly bait you into copying, though of course, once you get more experience you can also write songs in the same key.
Another thing we can grasp from the references is that all of these songs very much follow the chill drum and bass vibe, which has been rather popular in K-pop recently, and this is exactly the sound we are aiming to achieve too. While no two songs, even those of the same genre, are the same, there are two main things we focus on during the creative process. The first one, which we will look at today, is composition. Groove, chords, melodies would all fall into that category. The other, just as important, is sound selection, and we will look at that in another episode.
One more important thing here is having a template in your DAW. This would have the entire song structure mapped out already, as well as the main instruments you would be using. And if you're using Logic Pro, you can download our free K-pop structure template using the link below.
All of this is great as preparation, but what about starting the actual track?
There are many ways to start a production, and we will dedicate a whole video to the topic in the future, but here we wanted to highlight the approach we used in this track.
The thought of making a whole track is quite intimidating, even to experienced producers. But it is important to note that we do not develop a whole song at once. In fact, many producers start with making a short 4 or 8 bar loop, which they then develop into a full track. This is a fantastic approach as it gives us a very achievable goal that helps us not get demotivated in the early stages. Moreover, the loop we develop here would often serve great as a section of the song, such as the verse or the chorus.
But even within making a short loop, we can break down production into even smaller steps. We want to focus on one production element here. Which one is entirely up to you, but for our track we started with the drums. We already identified some commonalities between our references, and the shared drum groove is exactly what we want to start with here.
This is how our drum pattern looks like. We have the snare hitting on the 2 and the 4, and the kick is hitting at the 1, and very importantly, right here. This is what gives us that signature genre groove.
Additionally, we have a snare here and a second clap here. These two elements really elevate the groove.
In our track, we finished the drum groove with a percussion loop. This is very common, but we should thread carefully and make sure that the loop fits the main drums well. We should be careful of overlapping elements clashing with each other, and essentially we need to make sure that the rhythm of the loop matches our core drum loop and plays within the pockets of the main groove.
Playing this drum beat, you can already tell how strong of a foundation it is for a track.
Other ways to start a track include starting with the core chord progression, a bass line, or even a short melodic loop. This could depend on the genre you're trying to make as well.
We have an entire series about how to write K-pop chords, we have touched on how to make catchy melody loops in our Blackpink video, and finally we discussed bass lines in this video, so do check those out if you want more ideas. Ultimately, what matters most is building a foundation.
But back to the track, we have a drum groove, and what do we do next?
Once again we can go back to our references and pick out the main elements they all consist of. We already built our drums in rhythm, so now we should consider chords and harmony and bass. Which of the two you choose to work on first is entirely up to you. However, when starting out, we strongly recommend your bass line follows the chords, so in our case we'll start with the chords.
We have a whole series on chords and chord progressions, so if you haven't seen it yet, we highly recommend you pause this video now and go watch that first.
A lot of common chord progressions consist of 4 chords, and a lot of songs are built this way. However, you can always spice things up a little. As you can see, we used 5 chords here, with the last 2 chords sharing the last bar of our loop and adding a bit of bounce and flow.
In our chord series, we mentioned that we strongly recommend beginners to start with a tonic chord and end the loop with a dominant chord. And we stuck to this rule here too. We admit that we did spice things up a little though. We are utilizing what's called a borrowed chord, which is a chord from a different key. However, on the whole, we choose to look at the chord progression from the key of C minor. Ultimately, you can look at the chords in the way that makes the most sense to you, as with anything, music theory is here to help us make sense of the practice, not the other way around.
These Roman numerals may seem confusing, but at the core we can translate the progression to simply this.
You can see that the actual chord progression is a lot less complicated than it looks at first glance, and it simply utilizes chord function, which you can learn more about in our chord series. But let's look at our borrowed chord for a moment. It's a B-flat minor 7 chord, and while not from C minor, we're using it as a passing chord into our final chord here.
However, you may have already noticed we never use the root chord in our progression. The reason for this is quite simple. We want a bright chord progression, but we don't want it to be too over-the-top happy. Therefore, we're in a minor key, but we mainly use the major chords from that key.
You can also see that a lot of these chords are 7 chords. This gives them a particular flavor and is a sound K-pop loves to use.
And finally, our bass line. As we said earlier, the bass line following the chords is a good rule of thumb when starting out, and that's exactly what we did here too. But what does following the chords even mean?
The full chord is usually played by an instrument such as a synth, a piano, or guitar, while the bass only plays a single note. However, the two combined, meaning played at the same time, would build the harmony of the track, meaning we should always consider how they sound together. If the bass plays a note which does not feature in the full chord, the two may clash with each other. You can also use the other notes of the chord to make little fills, jumps, or slides in the bass line. As you can see, we do this in some of the places too. Additionally, for the rhythm, we can often follow the kick, which is exactly what we do here. This is what makes our bass line fit into the composition perfectly. The rhythm comes from our kick, the harmony comes from the chords. Since our bass notes decay a little bit longer than our short kicks, this creates a nice bounce. And since we utilize additional notes from our chords at the end of some of the bars, this creates a nice call and response pattern together with our chords, making it both a simple yet intricate composition. This is exactly the kind of balance we aim to achieve. Once again, we're building a foundation here, and not the whole house.
And just like that, we are done with the main composition of our 4-bar loop. As we already said, however, this is only one aspect of music production. In fact, you may have already noticed an extra element in our preview, which we'll explain in detail in our arrangement episode. But for now, go practice composition and tune in next time when we'll discuss sound selection in great detail.
Consider supporting us on Ko-fi if you want more videos like this one, and of course subscribe so you don't miss any future content. Huge thanks to all of our Ko-fi supporters, and if you want to talk to us more, join our Discord community with the link in the description down below.